weaving through the stunning Hampshire countryside on the edge of the South Downs National Park. The Mid-Hants Railway, affectionately known as the Watercress Line, runs for 10 miles from the market town of Alresford to the bustling town of Alton. Revived by volunteers after closure by British Rail, the Watercress Line has developed and gone from strength to strength, welcoming over 100,000 visitors every year, who visit the railway to step back in time and experience the golden age of steam. My name's Will, and I've been in love with steam since I was a boy.
But today I'm not going to be talking about steam locomotives. Instead, for this special Heritage Open Day video, we'll be looking at some parts of the station and railway that we may all have seen, but may not have noticed. At each of our stations, there's an abundance of wildlife and flowers just waiting to be enjoyed. So won't you join me on this journey to look at the hidden nature of the Watercress Line?
Our journey begins at Alresford, the spiritual home of the Watercress Line, and where the story began.
It was at this very spot, on the 30th of April 1977, that Linton White, the then chairman designate of Hampshire County Council, cut the ceremonial red tape, officially opening the Watercress Line. But the name chosen was by no means accidental. Even before the coming of the railway, Alresford was known for a very particular crop: watercress. Before the coming of the railways in 1865, watercress was grown here but only eaten locally, because due to its perishable nature, it could have been transported far by horse and cart. The coming of the Watercress Line, or Mid-Hants Railway, changed that, because now you had regular trains going from Alresford all the way to London. So the growers would bring their watercress in the evenings to be loaded onto trains and sent to London, where it was sold the very next morning in Covent Garden. Of course, London wasn't the only option. Alresford watercress could reach Nottingham in just 7 hours. The coming of the railways really helped the business, and it started to thrive after that. And it's still going. The Watercress Company have been continuing the legacy of growing watercress right here in Alresford. And in fact, if you haven't already, check out their video, where you see how they grow watercress and also some of the animals they see while doing so. But believe it or not, there's an even more local crop, even more local than Alresford itself, about 50 metres that way.
Sue Nash can normally be found taking care of passengers on the platform, but in her spare time takes care of a very different feature.
Hello Sue, thank you for joining us. So what are we looking at here? Was this a usual thing to see at a country station?
This is a typical station site here in the rural village of Alresford. The station master would have lived here on site at the station and would have grown his own fruit and vegetables to feed himself, his family and other station workers. Behind me here we've got French beans and sweet corn, we've also got radishes. In front of me we've got some courgettes and tomatoes, we've got beetroot and carrots, and then further down we've got some rhubarb, strawberries and our herbs.
So quite a bit of variety then. And I have to notice, your uniform, it's not one I'd normally associate with station staff. Where is it from?
So I'm wearing the uniform of the Women's Land Army. The Women's Land Army started back in World War I, but then started again back here in June 1939, with obviously lots of men going out to war. Women were needed to work in agriculture and on the farms, especially in rural locations like here in Alresford. They would have done lots of different jobs such as ploughing, growing veg and fruit, milking cows, taking cows to market, and this is the uniform that would have been worn. Nice thick willy jumpers, breeches, normally Wellington boots and a hat. Sometimes they'd wear bandanas just to keep the hair out of their face so that it didn't get caught up in all the machinery.
Sue, thank you so much, and I shall leave you to it.
Okay, well that's great, Will. See you soon. I'm off to make some lunch.
In an interesting turn of events, Alresford briefly became known for growing something else: tomatoes. During the Second World War, when the Channel Islands were occupied, Britain's supply of tomatoes was severely reduced. So the station master at the time, Mr. Compton, decided his contribution to the war effort would be to grow his own. And boy did he. He had 24 tomato plants laid up, which produced no less than 85 pounds of tomatoes, this being reported at the time in Southern Railway magazine. But he did add one comment, that the pleasing feature was that although they were accessible, it didn't prove too much for the travelling public. It's hard to believe that this station at one point was a tomato vine heaven. But then again, that's just one of the treasures here.
As the guard waved his green flag to the train and the locomotive roared into life, it was time for us to begin our journey up the line, following in the footsteps of those early preservationists who saved the line for our enjoyment. Here the train begins the climb up a 1 in 80 gradient, by no means an easy feat. Our first station stop is Ropley, home of the engineering headquarters of the line, but also a surprisingly old feature. Adrian Knight is one of a 25-strong team who care to the station here at Ropley.
Yeah, we've got a team of 25 people who come down to Ropley every Wednesday, and we look after the whole site, which extends for half a mile from one end to the other, including a field and the car park and the orchard and all the station gardens as well, and the topiary. We have quite a large number of varieties of flowers here, but what we try to do here is our flower and our planting reflects the natural flowers within the area. So we've got large areas of natural flowers growing and hardy perennials that complement them. We have an orchard here which was part of a countryside project started in 1994, where we've got 7 varieties of apple growing, which represent the old varieties that were very popular in Hampshire many years ago. We have one of the finest examples of topiaries on railway stations in the country, and there are about 7 trees which we trim pretty regularly to give them various different shapes, many of which have got birds on the top, like the one behind me. Yes, these topiaries must have been planted, I suppose, back in the 1870s and have been looked after by the station staff ever since.
As I let Adrian get on to what he does best, I had a moment to reflect on how the topiary here would have been around at the same time as my great-great-grandparents. But it was now time to continue our journey onwards and upwards towards the summit of the line. As we leave Ropley, the line steepens again up to 1 in 60. Which presented even more of a challenge.
In steam days, it was said that taking a train over the mid-Hants route was like taking a train over the Alps due to the steep gradients either side. Couple that with a heavy train makes it a daunting task for both driver and fireman. Of course, nothing's changed, the gradient's still there, so it still presents quite a challenge.
Medstead and 4 Mark Station marks the highest station both of the line and in the south of England, at 650 feet above sea level. Annette and Norman Day have been caring for the station in retirement, and I caught up with them to talk about some of the treasures the station holds.
Since we've taken it over, Norman's quite keen on a topiary, so we've formed quite a lot of topiary here, with Brian the snail being everyone's favourite.
Yeah, on the station here, I think if you wanted to count all the species we had, and if you are a keen botanist, you'd probably find a couple of hundred without any trouble at all. This time of year we are trying to manage for impact, and we have perhaps 10 or a dozen cultivars and dahlias, which are just coming into flower now, and they'll look splendid until about October. The station here, Medstead 4 Marks, is really a wonderful place. It's a typical wayside station, nothing spectacular, it's not like a mainline station, but it certainly has its own charms. There's plenty to see, wildflowers, cultivated flowers, and trains sometimes too.
Yeah, you enjoy coming here, we enjoy the social side of things with station staff, get quite a lot of visitors come and have a look around, and yeah, we get a lot out of it.
and as the next train pulled into the platform, I wished Annette and Norman well, and climbed aboard, ready to continue my journey onwards, past the summit and down the hill towards Alton, which gave me another opportunity to sit back and embrace the magic of steam.
Alton is our end terminus station where we join up with the national network, and occasionally is the first station people see when they visit us here. And although we don't have massive gardens, we do have wonderful hanging baskets and plant pots which the staff take extra good care at and really add a nice sense of ambience and occasion to the line. In its heyday, Alton had a reputation for the growing of hops, and these were located in the brewery sidings just around the corner. As the town expanded, the sidings got built over, so sadly there's little left. But it's not all doom, gloom and despair. For while Alton is not big enough to have grand expansive orchards or lovely veg plots, it does have one small but signature garden. Country stations occasionally came up with creative ways of displaying their names. Some use bricks like we have here at Alton, some use whitewashed stones, and if you go to Ropley, you'll see an even more creative way. But this small little garden hosts an abundance of wildflowers and wildlife, including lavender for the bees, which just adds a little extra element. And while it's by no means the biggest garden on the railway, it is still something rather special.
But as the signalman cleared the last train of the day into the station, it was time for my journey to end.
If you haven't had a chance already, check out the Watercress Company's video, where they're continuing the tradition of growing watercress at Alresford, and I understand some cheeky and curious animals also make a visit. But for now, it's time for us to say goodbye. So thank you so much for watching, and we hope you enjoyed your time with us here at the Mid-Hants Railway for Watercress Line.